I'll ask you questions on Vilna. All right? How long were you there?
I was born in Ghana.
And till when did you stay there?
Till 1943, when they liquidated ghetto. The Germans came in 1941 and they left the ghetto, and then in 1943 they liquidated.
Were there any anti-Jewish actions that were taken before the ghetto was established?
Of course, there were men caught in the streets and taken to labor camps supposedly, but they were shot instead behind Vilna.
This was organized by the Germans?
Yes.
By anybody else? Polish?
Oh, the Polish helped, the Lithuanians helped, the Estonians helped, the Latvians helped, everybody helped.
Were there pogroms too?
Yes.
Pogroms. Who lived in the ghetto with you? Your whole family, or?
No, my father was gone by that time. He was shot before. He was picked up in one of those men gatherings, the labor camps, and he was shot. When we came to the ghetto, I was only with my mother and sister already.
So it was just you and your mother and your sister in the camp?
In the ghetto.
In the ghetto. Wasn't there another woman?
Yeah, for me, but she had her family yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What work did you do in the ghetto?
I worked as a waitress. I worked outside the ghetto, washing floors in German army stations, and toilets and windows, all kinds of jobs.
There were refugees from other places too, right?
Yes, from the small towns around Vilna.
How were they accepted by the people from the area that was there, from the town people? They were accepted? They
were accepted very well. A family that occupied an apartment before the Germans came shared it with another 5 or 6 families, same apartment.
About how many people came from outside areas, approximately?
I don't know if a few thousand, I can't tell. I don't know what, there must be some statistics somewhere, but I have no idea really.
Do you know from which specific places they came, or did they just come from all over?
They came from small towns, from Lida, from Lithuania, from small villages that were either liquidated, and some people that were left joined the bigger communities.
And when was this? When did they start coming in?
Oh, they came already from as long as 1939. They started coming to Vilna. When the war started and Poland was occupied by the Germans, so refugees came in before the Germans came to Vilna, and after that all the time.
Until it was liquidated?
They came to Vilna and then they started coming into the ghetto too.
I see. Was it allowed to leave the ghetto in the beginning?
No, only to work. We had
so
specific
straight from
work.
The beginning it was true.
Yeah, it was all fenced off, and there was a gate with watchmen, German watchmen, and it was watched and counted the people that were coming out and that were coming in. Because before that we were wearing already the yellow star, even before the ghetto started. And the Germans came in first, a few months before. Only about 2-3 months before the ghetto started. They made us, as soon as they came, they made us wear the yellow star and walk in the street, not on the sidewalk.
What was the approximate size of the ghetto?
It was...
Good evening, good evening. Hello. Cold outside?
No. The approximate size of the ghetto?
The ghetto was, it was about
I'll take this to Fuchs right now.
all right. About, it was really 2 city blocks wide, and some places a little wider, about 5 blocks long.
Was there more than one ghetto in the same town?
Yes, there were 2 in the beginning. And the other one was smaller than the one I just told you about. And the other one was liquidated after a few months.
In 41?
They concentrated people, right. They made the 2 ghettos at the same time. They told people from one area to go into the ghetto I just mentioned, the 2 blocks by 5, something like that. And people from another area of town, they concentrated in another part of the city, which was a ghetto years back in the Tsarist, I guess, times. Years ago. But that ghetto they liquidated after a few months. In other words, they concentrated more and more people into that ghetto, and then they took them out to be shot.
You said there was a gate, not a wall, right?
There was a gate which we used to come in and to come out, and then there were the streets were open on the edge of the ghetto. Then they built a high fence, a wooden fence. We shouldn't see what's going on the other side.
Was there barbed wire?
The streets were cut off with fences.
Right.
As tall as the building. I mean, 2 street lights.
So you shouldn't look out even from above?
No, we couldn't see what's going on.
What was the organization
Even
of
the windows were boarded up, the ones facing
the
the
ones
outside.
facing the outside, right. What was the organization of the guards at the gates?
It were Jewish policemen and Gestapo was watching the gates.
Quite a few of them?
They were assigned a few policemen, maybe 4, maybe 5, of Jewish policemen, and also Gestapo a few, not many.
They had a pass system?
They had a pass system, right.
And what were the hours of entry and
hours of work? Some people used to get out to work as early as 3 o'clock in the morning and come back 5, 6, 7, 8. But they knew that first of all there were groups going to work of 20, of 30, of 40, 50, depending on where they worked. And those that only had a few, like we worked I think 6 people. I told you we worked at the army station. And we had a pass, and they knew that we have to come at a certain time. We worked certain hours. So we were not allowed to bring anything in. We were searched, not so much at the outgoing as the incoming. People used to hide potatoes in the sleeves of coats and in pants, and if they were caught, they used to get 50 lashes, 25 lashes. Or a piece of bread they used to hide to bring in for the families who were not allowed.
would they be shot for such actions also?
Sometimes, depending on the mood of the guard.
Did you have any knowledge of what was going on outside the Nazi territory? Did you know what was going on outside? Did you have any communication with...
You mean like the West or the United States or anything like that?
No, in Europe.
The Nazi, all Europe was Nazi territory. You mean what was going on the front lines or in the war?
Well, anywhere outside.
Well, the Polish, either friends, or sometimes workers used to tell us, but not much.
Were there
progress, well, mainly we were interested in the progress of the war. So we knew that if frozen German soldiers used to arrive at the stations, so we knew that there was trouble on the front lines because they were never telling the truth over the radio. We used to listen to the radio, but they were never telling the truth. We never knew the progress.
Were there underground newspapers or leaflets? Or?
In the ghetto, yeah. There was getting ready to join the underground organization, the partisans.
Resistance movement?
Resistance movement in the ghetto, right. They were organizing, but they didn't come to it in the ghetto film. Like in Warsaw, they wanted to have a resistance movement and not let them liquidate the ghetto.
Right.
But it didn't come to it.
Was there a mail system, a post system? Did you get mail to the outside?
No.
And you didn't receive any mail inside?
No. We had no contact with the outside world whatsoever, except that we worked outside the ghetto walls. There was no mail system, no nothing.
When did you first find out about the extermination system and the gas chambers, and how they were killing people off outside?
Well, while in the ghetto, we knew that they were shooting people in trenches, because some people were saved, like I mentioned it last time. They were missed by the
they were
bullets,
thought to be dead.
Right, they were thought to be dead. They were missed by the bullets, and they got up in the middle of the night. They ran away, and they came to the ghetto to tell the story. Right, they were undressed and all that. So this was an account, and then later, when we were. Me personally, we weren't in the real concentration camp where they had the crematoriums, but also we heard of some people that came to us. I told you there were some women exchanged from Turow. They came to our labor camp and they told us stories.
But while you were in the ghetto, did you know that
that wasn't going on yet? In 1943, they first started.
The death camps?
The death camps, 1943, 1942, and 1941 they didn't have.
I see.
I mean, there were death camps, but not so scientifically arranged. I mean, but the crematoriums, the burning, the gas ovens, and all that. The gas chambers. They used to gas people before that in trucks. They used to take out 100, 200 people, stuff them in a closed-in truck, in an enclosed truck, and let the gases, the fumes from the engine, poison them. So those were like small gas chambers, and unload them in trenches and bury them.
And how'd you find out about those? From people who escaped that way also?
No, from Poles that told us what's happening.
They saw what was coming?
Yes.
Did you?
Germans themselves, you know, sometimes when you worked at a place where the Germans supposedly were friendlier, so they talked, they used to tell us. They thought that they were friendly in a way that they tell us something about our people.
Did you or anybody in your family have any plans to escape while you were in the ghetto?
Yes, my sister and her husband, but then they came back because of me and my mother.
In other words, they got out?
No, but they planned to. They joined the resistance movement.
Your sister and brother-in-law had plans to escape, but because you and your mother were there, so they didn't go?
They came back, right.
They couldn't take you also?
Well, my mother was elderly even at that time yet, and I was too young, she was too old, and that's how it happened.
I see. How were they going to get out?
As I told you, they joined the ghetto resistance movement, and at first they had ammunition and all, and they thought they will resist the Germans and they'll start liquidating the ghetto. But then they decided against it, and instead most of them escaped through the sewer lines into the woods outside of Vilna, and they joined the partisans.
That's how they did it in Warsaw.
Yeah.
What did you eat in the ghetto at different times? Like, say, in the beginning was different than towards the end?
In the beginning, when we, first of all, they told us to take whatever we can in our hands when we left the apartments. So we put on clothes on ourselves as much as we could, and we took food. We knew that wherever will come, we won't get food right away. So we took some food in bags and shopping bags, valises, whatever. So each one of us had 2 packages when we came to the ghetto. But then the people that lived in the ghetto took in other people. And they said a family that had an apartment to themselves took in another 4 or 5 families. There was no other way to do it. So they shared.
They
so the
pooled
first
the food.
Right. But after that it was organized already, and we had little stamps, food stamps like, and we could buy for very little money food. But it was very little food also. It was poor, rationed.
How big were the rations?
Very small, hardly, not even survival rations.
And who was distributing them?
There was a Jewish committee. There
The
was a
Judenrat?
right. There was a government, a ghetto government. There was the Judenrat, and they had the ghetto. What's it called? Part that took care of providing the ghetto with food.
I see.
And then, when people started working, of course, they ate outside, wherever they worked. Usually. They made contact with Poles. The Poles used to bring them. They used to give them, either gold or money or whatever. Whoever had more savings at that time could survive better. Of course, there were richer people in the ghetto and poorer people in the ghetto. People had savings.
They could smuggle in food.
They could smuggle in. Sometimes they were caught. Sometimes they were not caught. But it's, of course, like always, there were poor people in the ghetto and rich people in the ghetto. A rich man, they had more food, and poor man, that they had nothing to eat. It was a matter of food and survival. There was no matter of clothing or anything like that.
When you said the families used to live together in one apartment, what were the cooking arrangements?
Well, I don't know if in every case. So we moved in with very nice people, and it seems that the woman of the house, she cooked for everybody. She cooked for 20 people the first few days. See, we were not really in war, but it was wartime all around, and most people had big, amounts of food, because there were times during those 2 years when the Russians were with us, and the Germans didn't attack yet, that there was no food. So every household had big amounts of flour and big amounts of butter and big amounts of sugar, all those basic foods. And so she shared it. She actually cooked for about 20 people for more than a week.
And
then after that, each one tried to, nobody took advantage, but they pulled the food. But I don't know if it happened like that in every house. It could have well happened that everybody ate whatever they had. But they took turns in the kitchen after that. We took turns, like my mother cooked for me and my sister, and everybody took care of their own family. And they cooked at different times, because there was one kitchen for sometimes 50 and 60 people to share. And we had in Vilna no gas. You had to bring wood, burn wood, to light a stove.
How available was wood or coal?
Very, very hard to get, but they used to bring in some boards somewhere that they found. Everybody on his own tried to, to find things. Some had, it was in September. It's very possible that some people already had to prepare wood for the winter. Our stoves we used to use wood to heat our apartments in the winter.
So you had to store it up?
So they had to store it up. So it's very possible that the ghetto area had a lot of wood storage. And people tried, even though the gates were watched. I remember my sister had a coat with very wide sleeves. She risked her life, because some were shot for it too, some were...
For hoarding wood?
No, not wood. Potatoes she had in this. Even pieces of wood, it was very essential. Some people used to bring woods in their sleeves, men in their pants. And they risked their life for it, because this was also a matter of life and death. In the winter, to keep the family warm, and in the summertime for cooking. For cooking we also used electric little plates, and there wasn't enough electricity, so they used to put reinforce the wiring with metal. Like here, sometimes you can reinforce it with a penny.
Really?
Sure.
Wow.
In the downstairs, what are they called? Those, my brain is rusty.
What, in the outlet?
Not in the outlets, in the main switches. What are these called? That you replace if you have a short in the wires.
The fuse.
Fuses, right. They used to reinforce the fuses with heavier wiring, so the people could cook, because we had 4 and 5 plates going at one time, hot plates, and the wiring wasn't strong enough.
So then you had to find wire.
So yes, but people smuggled, they managed. You know, Jews are very creative.
When they need
managed very well.
Before the war, you told me last time there were different political parties.
Yes.
Which ones were there?
In
your ghetto?
Before the ghetto?
Before the ghetto.
There was no political party.
Before the ghetto, in your area, which ones
you
were
mean
there?
in Vilna? They had
Yeah.
the Zionists, they had the Zionist revisionists, it was the Keren HaKayemet, and they had the Bund, they had communists too. In other words, they had socialists, communists, and Zionists, left and the right Zionists.
How strong were they?
Oh, they were quite active, very active. Jabotinsky came to Vilna a few times. In other words, he had an audience, otherwise he wouldn't come.
Mm. Do you remember the names of the leaders before 1939 of these groups? Of any of the groups?
Well, you mean the local leaders you're talking
Yeah.
about? Well, one was, my husband was a leader of a local Betar, too. You know, youth organizations.
Yeah.
The Masada, Betar. But I don't think they were worldwide known. I mean, those were heads of local organizations.
Do you know what happened to them during the war?
Well, different. One I know is in Israel now. His name is Muscat. And he was in the ghetto, and he survived by luck, like anybody else who survived. My husband was a leader of a youth group at that time, and he was sent to Russia, everybody in his own way. A lot of people left for Israel right between 39 and 41.
They were able to get out.
They got out through Russia. There was a time that they were selling visas for Japan for 2 leads, like it's 2 Lithuanian dollars. And many people didn't buy it because they thought there was some sort of a Russian trick. But most of the refugees that came from other parts of Poland, they felt they had nothing to lose because Vilna was no home to them anyway. And they bought it, and it seemed it did get them to Japan, but some people got out on the way, and they crossed through Turkey to Israel illegally.
Do you know what happened to the people who went to Japan?
Yes, a lot of them wound up in the United States after the war. They got through the war in Japan. Yeah, Japan and China.
How was the first Judenrat appointed in Vilna?
I'm trying to think if I know. I don't really know who appointed them.
Were they leaders within Vilna before?
Within the community, but it so happened that the chief of our ghetto came from Lithuania. So maybe he was appointed by the Germans. I really don't know. But mainly there was a Jewish a kihila. So it's a Jewish committee, sort of, right? In Vilna before the I'm trying to think back now, because at that time I was very young and I really didn't know what was being done. But when I think back now, so there was a Jewish committee in Vilna before the Germans came in. And I assume that they must have organized it and appointed people. But I really don't know.
Do you remember what the members were like? What type of people belonged to the Judenrat?
Some very respectable people. Then they started organizing a police force, a Jewish police force. But they may have been very respectable, but sometimes, it depends what job they do, People get a job to do, and when you see how they do it, this is what you see about, what you can tell about their character afterwards.
They were all different kinds then?
Yes.
They were the good ones, the not so
Of
good.
course. And, the chief of our ghetto, let's say, he was a decent man, but he had a philosophy, and I think I told you about it last time, that he thought if the Germans wanted from him a few thousand Jews, he felt that he hoped that some Jews will survive, so he wanted the ones to survive to be a young breed. No couples.
Oh.
German assessment.
Still the same strict?
Yes, but different. They were different people. When we came to the underground castle, we had one German, the Hauptscharführer. He took care of the camp. And he had with him, maybe a dozen, maybe more, that helped him. And a few women.
Where were
And
the
that
women
was
taken
it.
from?
Also German. German women, Blitzmädel they were called. And they took care.
Were they a little bit nicer in any way?
No, they were hitting at any chance they had. And I remember one, not because she was nice, she was crazy. She must have been in the evening after work. He was away, this Hauptscharführer, otherwise he would kill her. She was sitting near our barrack and she was singing. She thought she knows how to sing, and she was singing, and she took this. We were applauding her, so she took pride in her voice.
Did they kill anybody?
No, not in our camp. They did.
If anything,
They
just
were
whipped?
lashes, right? Quite a few women survived 25 lashes, 50 lashes, just for any minor offense.
And these again were also only Jewish women, right?
Yes.
Okay. The work that you did was still for aging?
Yeah, this time was trucks. I was repairing motors for trucks, rewinding electrical motors.
Okay. What about the food?
Was again about the same. It was a half a quart of soup and about a half a pound of bread, and it was all right, and it was good. If we get that every day, it would be good.
You got
But
it once
at times,
a day at night?
sometimes we got an 8. A loaf was a 2-pound bread. It was a loaf of bread. So sometimes they cut it in quarters, and every woman was watching how it was cut. It should be even, or she should get the bigger quarter. It wasn't weighed. It was cut in quarters and was distributed in the evening with the bread, with the soup. And sometimes when there was a shortage, we got 8, and sometimes we didn't get 8.
And was the routine the same? You wake up at 7, go to
Right.
work after the coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and then straight through the whole day, no breaks?
No, we didn't have any breaks.
And
We had a norm to cover, a certain amount of work to deliver. And if we fell behind, we were always afraid they're going to send us to Stuttgart. And we would lose the job. You lose the job, you go back to the concentration camp. Because we did have numbers on our jackets, on our clothes. Our uniform consisted of a dress, of a striped dress and a striped jacket for the winter. Of course, no lining nor anything like that. Just from the same fabric, it was a dress and a jacket. And we had a number, and each one of us remembered the number. Besides, it was printed on our jacket, but we didn't have it burned in our skin. Mm. And the number was a number taken from Stuttgart. In other words, we did belong to the camp, to the concentration camp of Stuttgart. So any time there was something you didn't misbehave or anything like that, so we felt that our Hauptscharführer was nice enough to give that woman 25 lashes, better than sending her to Stuttgart.
Oh, that was a kind act.
That was a kind act, because if he would send her to Stuttgart, she could have survived, but it was almost like sending her to death.
Did anybody try to escape?
At the end, when we were evacuated.
No, before you were evacuated?
No, not from our camp.
And there was no resistance movement or underground?
No, we were stripped of every energy, of everything.
There was no contact with anybody outside?
Because most women, we were very lucky and very envied. I mean, my family, that I had a sister and a mother. Most women were lonesome, they didn't have anybody, and they didn't have the energy even to do anything. This is what happened. He stripped the people of the morale first. And that's why there was no movement. Because they felt nobody's alive anyway. What for? So there was never even a thought of it.
There wasn't
to resist.
Were there any women who received special favors for any reason at all? Did any German guards take any liking to any of the women?
Yeah, there was talk in our camp, but I don't know. Apart from that he would give her a sandwich, an extra sandwich. That was a big favor. But otherwise, I don't think so. No, in our camp it wasn't. But it did happen. In other camps it happened.
You never know.
Yeah.
There was also no cultural activities, was there? Except
there were.
Oh, there were?
There were.
Besides the lady who sang?
The lady who sang, we did make a puppet theater.
Because you were
asked to,
or because you wanted to?
No, because we wanted to keep our spirit up. So we had Sundays off. So in the evening, the people, the women, either they talked or they sang or they made puppets and made a show on a Sunday once, I remember. That was still in Riga.
For the inmates, not for the
For
guards?
the inmates, no, not for the guards.
And they let you do it? Or they didn't know?
Maybe they didn't know, maybe they didn't know, because we had a Jewish woman, also the head of the camp. Besides the German woman, there was a Jewish woman, a German Jewish woman. That was the head of the camp, but she was sort of responsible to the German woman, and she was telling her what's going on and keeping the things for her in order and reporting to her. So maybe she told her that the women are entertaining, and she left the cell. But later on, that's only in Riga was like that.
What about the women knew each other?
Some were reading poetry or writing poetry on Sunday. Did
the women get along well with each other? Or there was still a division between Germans and Polish?
Yes, that always was. But they were striking up friendships because the lonely ones, were always, they're 2 together, 3 together, those that didn't have anybody. So they shared, they didn't have to share because everybody got the same portion anyway. But they stuck together. They slept one next to the other, because everybody was one next to the other.
There was
Anywhere.
no German barracks in Polish barracks.
Oh, there were, yeah. But I mean, if one woman turned, the whole barrack used to turn. They were so close,
Yeah.
one next to the other was slipped. It wasn't for like separate bunk beds. It was one big bunk bed that's about 15 or 20 women across on one bunk bed, 3 flights. And a second flight again and again. So if one was dirty, everybody was dirty. And we were all dirty. Lice, terrible.
The sanitation conditions of the camp were not that good.
Well, ours was the good one. It was the cleanest comparing to what they had in concentration camp. And yet we had lice, and we used to wash, but we had no soap. We were not distributed soap. So it was at a premium. If somebody got a piece from some of the workers, it was a big deal. And didn't have any other underwear. I told you a dress and a jacket, yes, a pair of panties and a slip out of the same striped fabric. But we had no change. In other words, Sunday was the day when we could have washed it and dried it. And in the wintertime we had no way of drying it. In the summertime we washed it and we dried it on Sunday in the sun when it was sunny. But washing meant just in Riga we had plenty of hot water. Meant just keeping it and scrubbing it under the hot water.
And you had to
But
stay
in
naked
Turow
in the meantime?
we would put on the dress without the underwear. The dress we didn't attempt to wash ever, because the dress was a little heavier fabric. But the slip and the panties we attempted to wash, but not in the winter time. In other words, we were wearing the same thing all the time for big years. For a year, we were not given a change of clothes from September from while in IAG in Riga, right? And then we were stripped of our clothing, and we were shaved, and we were given another uniform, a new uniform, and that we wore till we were liberated. And I wanted to keep the uniform for a souvenir, but we threw it away because my mother said it's going to swim away. So we threw it out. It was in January in the snow, and we threw it out because it was dirty. Just from wearing it. So it was impossible to keep clean because we had no way of washing. We had only a way of washing our body with no soap. And in Turow we didn't have any hot water, so we used to go in the morning just before. We used to wake up 6 o'clock, so that would be ample time, for the apparel for the lineup, for the morning lineup. Roll call. And to wash, so we used to run out in the street, and there was a pump, and we used to wash on the snow from the cold water pump. Nothing happened to us, never caught cold. But wash, that means just scrubbing with water, that's all, because we had no soap. But at least we felt that whatever is there will crawl off. When we were lucky we had no hair, otherwise it would be impossible. Couldn't wash our hair.
Did you ever get sick, or anybody ever get sick?
No, never got sick. My mother was sick all the time. She had gland tuberculosis. It was running out. It was open. Her neck was open, and pus was coming out from there for 2 years. So we made her a little scarf out of her slip, and she covered it with a scarf so they shouldn't know. And we got from the infirmary some, not even a disinfectant, but a piece of cotton to keep it moist all the time to let the pus run out.
Other than that, the infirmary didn't help.
They didn't have penicillin at that time, so whoever had a cold anyway had to depend on his good resistance. But they had sulfur, but that they didn't have. They didn't have that in the infirmary. But if somebody cut himself, they had something to put a Band-Aid, I guess. Iodine, or simple things, aspirin.
The infirmary in Tarn was just like the one in
Yes,
Kaiser
we had our
Wilhelm.
own doctor from the women.
A German doctor?
No, it was our own. She came from Vilna.
A Jewish woman?
Yeah, she's in Israel now. And she picked among the women a friend of hers, an assistant, that the sisters are sort of a nurse. And whatever, they didn't have anything to work with. But if somebody had a cyst, and there were many women that had cysts from lack of vitamins and maybe from uncleanliness, so she used to open it and give a little iodine or a simple medication. Alcohol she had, a piece of cotton she had, maybe some Band-Aids she had. That's what it was all about.
Okay, I think just one thing. Was there ever any help among the inmates? In other words, if someone knew that something that was going to happen, for instance, a selection, did anybody ever try to help anybody else in Tarn? Or did each one fend for herself, mostly?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no, because if somebody tried to help somebody else, it would be an account of somebody else again. Which did happen, that a woman signed up with a certain group. The head became told her to sign up the women that were working in that group. And she knew there were 15 women, let's say, working with a certain group in the factory. And she put a friend of hers name in, and she excluded somebody else. So that's helping, but helping somebody else. So it worked out that it didn't matter anyway, because he said that some groups will go, but then he changed it around because he wanted to keep families intact, supposedly. So it didn't. But if they could help, they did. But everybody was out for himself anyway in the final thing, because women dropped their children in order to stay alive when at the first selection after the ghetto. Because women with little children were sent last. I told you a story about that little blonde girl that I remember. But there were many, not only stories, many women dropped their children and they ran away from them to save their own life. And some young children, young women, went with their parents, with their mothers, they were all women. The men were separated before from the women after the ghetto. Men were separate selection, the women had a separate selection. So some young women went with their mothers because they didn't want to leave their mothers alone. And some mothers left their little children, not all, but some did. Ran away because they wanted to save them, some survived.
And most of the women didn't see the husbands or brothers or fathers after the first selection?
No, not most, none of them. Oh, in Kaiserwald, I think some, no, they weren't sent to Kaiserwald. They didn't. They were completely after the ghetto, when the ghetto was liquidated, the women were sent to Kaiserwald. But the men were sent to Estonia. Estonia is in English Estonia?
Yeah.
Okay. They were sent to a different place altogether, so they didn't. They didn't see each other again.
One thing I didn't ask you, when you went from Riga to Tarn, the women in Tarn were only those that came from Kaiserwald?
Yes, they set up the place. They set up the factory.
So it's the same women?
Yes, but part of them.
But only
part of them.
Because some went to
Stuttgart.
Stuttgart.
Right.
Okay.